All right, we're live. It's the week before the draft. Let's eat. It is the locker room. Landry Locker here. We are live.
We'll do it live.
Appreciate everyone for coming through. It is the week before the draft. The cabin fever wearing off, and the dialogue, the rumors, they're kind of intensifying. I want to get into one of the head-to-head battles that nobody's talking about that we probably should be talking about a little bit more. I came across a term that I absolutely love that I think we should use and localize, and maybe it will become useful when it comes to trying to figure out who the hell the Texans are going to take at 25. We'll also look at some of the visits as well as some other stuff going on around the NFL. Be sure to subscribe, like, right along. We will have a draft party at Karbach on the 26th. Myself and Cody Stutes, S&L, which you can see here live, 4 o'clock around here. We'll be out there in the Biergarten at 11 a.m., taking in round 3 of the draft and mingling, or day 3 of the draft, I should say, and mingling with the people. The number one objective for the Texans in this draft is they got to make the Texans more Stroud friendly. CJ Stroud last year had an offensive coordinator that was in over his head, a system that was not progressing, an offensive line that, whether it was because they weren't on the same page or they just weren't good enough or not coached well enough, they weren't good. And he had a depleted receiving core at the end of the year, which I really don't blame the organization for. They couldn't have forecasted all the injuries that happened in that front. And unfortunately for them, one of those injuries kind of carries over because the status of Tank Dell is very much in doubt. But the goal is going to be to make the Texans more CJ Stroud friendly. I think they've done it on the defensive side, and I do think a defense can be a quarterback's best friend, even though it's not, the guys aren't on the field at the same time as him. I do think it can be a quarterback's best friend. Ask Joe Burrow and the Bengals if they believe that they could use a better defense. If they would have helped, I mean, we're talking about perhaps the MVP winner if they have a defense even close to what the Texans are. So I think in that area on defense, they've done that. We really haven't seen it on offense. We don't know how they're going to be coached. We don't even know what the scheme is or anything. And we don't know who CJ Stroud is going to be throwing to, which is one of the main storylines, one of the main pieces of dialogue heading into the draft. Are they going to go receiver? Can they go receiver? Will they go receiver? Is Emeka Ibuka going to be there? McMillan and Golden, we think they're going to be gone. What are they going to do? Are they going to pivot, and are they going to go running back and tight end? And that's the main priority. Make no mistake about it. They got to make this team more CJ Stroud friendly. And CJ's got to help the cause as well. He's got to be better as well, which we've talked about a number of times. I was talking to someone that I respect a lot, Brian Broaddus, up there at 105.3 The Fam, up 45. And I've always admired him. He's a Super Bowl winning scout. He's one of those nerds. He actually started out with Dane Brugler. That was when I was first really, really drawn to his work. Done some work with him before. But I was talking to him about this draft, and he used a term that I really, really liked. And he wasn't using it in a derogatory manner. He was simply talking about scouts versus media scouts. And he said that media scouts, which I would consider myself, I'm not sitting there watching tape. I watch a lot of college football, and I kind of cherry pick, and based on need, I do as much homework as I can on prospects that the Texans may draft. But I'm a media scout. And we will talk about like evaluation. And by media scout, that doesn't mean scout. It's just basically I'm not a real scout. But we'll talk about, is this guy falling? What's going on with this? What's going on with that? The typical stuff that we typically do when we discuss stuff this time of the year and leading up to the draft. And quite frankly, we get the cabin fever because just like you get tired of waiting for 2 weeks for the Super Bowl, and that final week is just kind of like, man, we've talked about this. Where are we going to go from here? I think you kind of have that in a chunk of weeks when it comes to the draft. I think late May to early April, up to about last week, is when that takes place. But he was talking about certain players, and he thinks that the media scouts have done a disservice and that the media scouts have perhaps misled us on a few players. He's talking about McMillan. He was talking about a couple of the safeties. And he was saying, yeah, I think he said it multiple times during the 20-minute phone call or however long it was. You know, I think the media scouts are off on this guy. And the only way to see that is when the draft actually happens. We kind of witnessed it here. If we kind of localize it, there was talk about, you know, CJ Stroud and the test, the S2 test that none of us had really heard of. And apparently his stock was going to drop, and it didn't. So we were kind of duped by the media scouts. There's times where there's talk that someone might fall and they end up not falling. Media scouts misleading us. Will Levis, though, sometimes media scouts are right. Will Levis, he's going to fall. He's a turd. He's not ready. All this type of stuff. He falls. And the media scouts, they were right on draft day. And it seems like whatever they were hearing and whatever's going on, it's kind of played out and it kind of looks true. So the question I have here, and I'm going to pull up a graphic of the top 5 potential misleading media scout narratives heading into the draft. Where could the media scouts be misleading us when it comes to this draft? Where could the media scouts be misleading us when it comes to this draft? I have the top 5 possibilities when it comes to where they could be misleading us, and I'll bring them up right here. Top 5 localized media scout angles. Angle 1, first round wide receiver market up to 25. It seems like a foregone conclusion that Golden and McMillan are kind of battling for that number 1 wide receiver spot. And there seems to be a healthy amount of doubt that Ibuka even gets to the Texans, leaving them kind of in no man's land when it comes to drafting a wide receiver at 25. Unless, as this list goes on, something else is true. But the first round wide receiver market up to 25 is one of those angles that it will be really interesting to see when the first wide receiver is taken. It'll be really interesting to see who that first wide receiver is. And then it'll be interesting to see specifically where McMillan ends up getting drafted, especially with all the polarizing conversations around him. So that's number 1. I don't think we're being misled by this. I don't think McMillan or Golden will be there when the Texans select. The Ibuka thing could go a number of ways. I would lean that he's not there, but I don't think that is a foregone conclusion. I think we can 100% say that Golden appears to be wide receiver 1. So that's media scout angle number 1. Media scout angle number 2 is the fall of Banks. And I don't get this. Kelvin Banks out of Texas. I saw Dane Brugler had him ranked as the 2nd ranked guard. I've seen a lot of mock drafts where he falls to 25 to the Texans. This one's going to be interesting. Is the fall of Banks a real thing? And in a world where teams need offensive linemen and even really good guards that could potentially play tackle, does a guy like Kelvin Banks fall to 25 with the Houston Texans? It seems to be a very popular angle. It's a very popular media scout angle. Are the media scouts right on Banks, or is that strongly over exaggerated, the demise of Banks' draft stock? That's number 2. Number 3 is the running back after the first 2. It seems like a foregone conclusion. Genty's going early. Seems to be some momentum picking up to him being drafted before the Raiders in the top 5 by Jacksonville, New England, or someone trading up. And then it seems like a foregone conclusion that Omarion Hampton goes. And then a running back doesn't go in the first round, but there's a significant run in the second. Another running back. So the over-under right now in Vegas, and PFF actually put this up. The over-under right now, not PFF, Pro Football Talk. The over-under right now is 2.5. on the running backs. So is that real, or could someone sneak into the first round? Should someone be sneaking into the first round? I'll get to that in a second. I think there's a head-to-head matchup that we're not paying enough attention to here in the locker room. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Shout out to everyone that joins us on S&L. We hope to see you at the draft party at Karbach on the 26th at 11 a.m. in the Biergarten. So is any running back going, are they going over 2.5, or is it just 2? And that's the end of that. That's Media Scout angle number 3. Media Scout number 4 is the guard positional value. And there appears to be a feel that the Texans, if they decide that they want to pick a guard, that they could pick the top guard of their choosing, that they'll be the first team to take a guard, and they may be the only team to take a guard in the first round. And if you believe what a lot of teams are what a lot of people believe, in that whenever someone's invited to the draft that they're going to go in the first round, then Tyler Booker might be the guy to watch there. So do you believe that? And then there's number 5, the Burden 2024 dud. Is the one bad season that Luther Burden had, is that enough for him to completely fall out of the first round and not even be considered by the Texans? And if you look at what happened to Burden at Missouri from his first year to his final year, or from his 2023 season to his 2024 season, the receptions dropped 25. The yards were damn near cut in half. He went from 1,212 to 676. The yards per catch dropped 3 yards from 14.1 to 11.1. The touchdowns went from 9 to 6. The yards per game went from 93 to 56. And just overall, he had a crappy season in 2024, to the point where now you don't even really hear about him being entertained by the Texans at 25. Now, I will say that while it is intriguing what Burden was before this season, if the knocks on him are true and it's kind of an effort thing, kind of a mindset thing, I don't know if that's something that the Texans really play with, especially at a position that important and especially in the first round. So that's another thing that we got to keep an eye on when it comes to the Media Scout. Sometimes you hear stuff like that, and that guy's being called at 25. But I think that's something to really keep an eye on with Luther Burden. And I don't think he's going to be considered at 25, but crazier things have happened. Speaking of which, Nick Caserio going to speak on Wednesday. Will Nick Caserio provide anything outside of the word salad? You think Nick Caserio will provide anything outside of the word salad? I think we can maybe get some thoughts on current players. I think the trick to getting an answer from Nick is not really giving him an opportunity to give generic answers, generic wordy answers. Talk specifically about actions, talk specifically about players, and just see what he says. But if you're going to ask him, hey, are you going to consider moving up or moving back? He's going to say, there's a possibility of everything. There's a possibility of definitely moving up or moving back or all that. Or what about your wide receiver room? Yeah, we always want to, there's always opportunities to get wide receivers. We're open for business. We're willing to go up. We're willing to go back, blah, blah, blah. I think we'll get some nice nugs from Nick Caserio on Wednesday. That's going to be at noon. 8 o'clock that night, myself and Cody Stutes, we're going to have John Harris on the Super Stream. Second annual John Harris Super Stream. He never does those. He prepares for the draft as much as anyone else. So you don't want to miss that. Set your alerts for 8 o'clock. We got you covered on that. And I think you'll enjoy what they got going. What myself and Cody got going when it comes to that. Argovitz says, why would he reveal his strategy to the opposition? He wouldn't. That's the point. That's the point. That's why you don't ask him about his strategy. That's the whole point, sir. But it's definitely prime lying season. We all know that. That's what the draft is. But you can ask him about, you moved on from your offensive line. How important is the offensive line? How much confidence do you have in these guys? But yeah, he's gonna say anything. I think he could say something substantive. I do find it fascinating, and this is just the popcorn eater in me. I guess people say I instigate. I'll take the accusation. I'll plead no contest to saying that I like to instigate a little bit. But I do find fascination in how annoyed and kind of just eye roll people get when Caserio speaks. Because he doesn't say much. Like, it's not, he's a little bit looser, but he doesn't say much. Sometimes he will, but it should be apparent to know what questions you're going to get decent answers to and what other ones you're just kind of asking just to ask. So I kind of enjoy the Nick Caserio thing. I always gave a hard time back when I was at the radio station. I always gave a hard time to the guys for having him for 45 minutes because I just think it's too long. Breakfast Club doesn't even have like Jay-Z or Gucci Mane straight out of jail for 45 minutes. They have presidential candidates on, and they don't have them for 45 minutes. You have Nick Caserio, who's not going to say much. I've always thought that was funny. Hey, Nick, how you doing on time? Well, damn, he's still here. Could have got all that in 20 minutes, but he's still here. But I've always found that interesting with Caserio. We'll see what he gives us on Wednesday. And if he says anything, I want to ask him about the offensive line, the evaluation of the offensive line. And I think that will be an interesting answer. And I don't think if he gives the word salad, that's fine. But I think it'll be an interesting answer to hear about the evaluation of the offensive line. You've invested a ton. You got rid of 3 of those heavy investments in the offseason. You got rid of your offensive line coach. Like, is that a problem? Is it fair to say that that's been a weakness of this squad and of this regime? And how do you feel about where you are when it comes to the ability to evaluate offensive linemen? I think that's a fair question. I think he'll answer it. He's always, if you ask him a toughie, he'll answer it. If there's really no weaseling out of it. But we'll see what Caserio says. It's going to be nice to hear from him. We haven't really heard from him all off season, not even after free agency. So some teams have post free agency press conferences. The Texans are not one of those. So we'll hear from Caserio tomorrow and hear what he's got to say. Not tomorrow, Thursday. I guess if we want to fast forward to midnight, but yeah, Wednesday at noon. We'll react to that on the night stream. We'll leave that out when it comes to John Harris. So really, really stacked day on Wednesday. And then we'll be a week away from the draft on Thursday. And then it's just all bets are off after that. The cabin fever's gone. Bada bing, bada boom. And we'll see what Nick Caserio has to say. But it's a really, really huge Wednesday there. Be on the S&L stream at 8:00. Because John Harris he's good in that format. A lot of you don't hear him on that in that format, but he's really, really good in that format. So we've done a lot of head-to-head when it comes to wide receivers. We've done a lot of head-to-head when it comes to tight ends. But there's another kind of head-to-head that I think is being dismissed. And the question is, should it be dismissed? I don't think so. Because I think in an alternate world where Quinshon Judkins stays at Ole Miss for 3 years, I think in an alternate world where that happens, I think we're looking at him different as a running back. I think this is one of the bigger media scout misses is I think we're looking at Quinshon Judkins like someone who wasn't really on the national stage until he went to Ohio State. And what we saw at Ohio State was a guy who was sharing the backfield with another guy who it was a 1A, 1B type of situation. He went there and joined Trey Henderson. But before that, Quinshon Judkins was actually the number one running back in the SEC, arguably. And for 2 years, including straight out of high school, he was the lead back for Ole Miss. Omarion Hampton's been the lead back at UNC for 2 years. But his freshman year, he was not the lead running back. He was a guy who chipped in. Quinshon Judkins was immediately the lead running back at Ole Miss straight out of high school. And if you look at the 2-year body of work, Hampton does have the upper hand, but I think it should be taken into account that Judkins did it his freshman and sophomore year and then went to Ohio State and had a hell of a season and won a national championship and had damn near 20 touchdowns. Hampton kind of felt his way out freshman year, and then he ran the ball as one of the better backs in the nation his sophomore and junior year. But let's just pull up the head-to-head with these guys. And again, we've already factored in the freshman year with the bell cow, but you look at the yardage, Hampton has the upper hand. The yards per carry, Hampton up by 0.8. Judkins has more touchdowns. And then the receiving, Hampton has the edge there. But Ole Miss was a passing team. So they had a lot of weapons and they were a passing team. So there probably was a lot more options on the perimeter than dumping it down to Hampton. But if you look at these numbers and you take into account that one of the years Judkins was a freshman, and in Hampton's 2 years, he was a junior and a senior, or sophomore and junior. The question remains, like, let's say Judkins stays at Ole Miss, and let's say that at Ole Miss he has his best year yet. Let's say Judkins has like 24 touchdowns, 1,600 yards or something like that. And all we know about Judkins, he never goes to Ohio State. And hear me out on this, because I think this matters with how teams are looking at him. But he never goes to Ohio State, and we just know him as a guy who carried the full workload in the SEC and was the best running back in the SEC in back-to-back seasons. How are we looking at him? How are teams looking at him? Because it's one thing, and I'll be honest, I didn't watch Judkins a lot at Ole Miss. I was familiar with his game, but I wasn't paying as close of attention to him as I was watching Ohio State and watching what Ohio State was doing and watching Ohio State in the college football playoff. I wasn't paying as much attention. I think a lot of people, if we're being honest with ourselves, I would say even the media scouts, which we previously mentioned, I don't even know he was at Ole Miss. if they're completely honest with themselves. So let's just pretend that Judkins, instead of going to Ohio State and splitting carries because he wanted to win a national championship, let's say that he stays at Ole Miss and the numbers are just insane. Is it a foregone conclusion that Omarion Hampton goes before him? Now, I know the athleticism of Omarion Hampton gets a lot of attention. I think rightfully so. But Judkins ran a pretty nice 40. It's not like he's not athletic. It's not like you wonder if he can carry the full workload. I think he's probably capable of doing more than he was asked to do, just like I think is probably the same with Hampton. I think you probably say the same thing about Trey Henderson at Ohio State. But that might be something that we're overlooking. Like this over under 40, 42. Does Judkins go past 42? I've seen him projected at 60, which I think is insane. That would be lucky for the Texans. And I've seen him projected as maybe the third running back taken. Maybe on the back end by a team that needs a running back and would like to have him complement one of their backs, maybe a good team. The 2.5, who's the half? If we acknowledge that Genty is 1, Hampton is 2, who's the half? Like if the over ticket cashes to the over 2.5 running backs that Pro Football Talk is throwing out there, if the over is cashed, who is that half? Who is that half? Is it Trey Henderson? Is it Judkins? Caleb Johnson in the mix? Because it can only be a few guys. So if Las Vegas, who takes everything into account, they do the educational thought process behind these types of things. They take money on it. I think it's a minus 110 bet. So it's a pretty standard bet. Who's the half? You could say could be Henderson because of the Gibbs factor, the fact that he can do some explosive things. But is it the craziest thing to imagine that it might be Judkins and maybe the media scouts, including myself, before I saw the Judkins light? But maybe Judkins could be the third running back taken? I don't know. I do think it would be interesting in an alternate universe to go back a year from now and imagine if he had never transferred to Ohio State and just continued to be the best running back in the SEC at Ole Miss, how we would look at him. Because the other guys he's getting compared to, he's up against are Caleb Johnson, Dylan Sampson. These are decent backs. Caleb Johnson's out of Iowa. He had the full workload at Iowa. Didn't fumble one time last year. I've seen some interesting comps from him. That he's also a guy who visited with the Texans. And then there's Sampson, who he was only the starting running back at Tennessee for 1 year. He ended up being the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. So he's another guy that's getting a lot. But I do think the Judkins thing is worth watching. Someone just said Buffalo Judkins. I could see that. Right now they're in the contract dispute with James Cook. They have other running backs, but none of them are capable of doing that. They could probably use. We saw how pathetic they were on short yardage. Buffalo. We saw how pathetically embarrassing they were. They couldn't pick up a yard. Some people would say, well, it was the spot. Shouldn't have been that close. I mean, they were trying the awkward ass tush push. They were trying dives and all that with the 1 yard. One time Cook had to spin off and get in the end zone on 4th and goal. I mean, they look lost on 4th and 1. If they could execute 4th and 1 and they had someone who could move the chains, we're at the very least talking about the Buffalo Bills losing to the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl, maybe winning a Super Bowl. So that half, the running back post Hampton and Ginty, maybe Judkins is a good option for the Buffalo Bills. Maybe if the Texans don't love Judkins, that's an opportunity to trade with the Bills. Last year, the Bills traded back with the Chiefs, and then they traded back again. Maybe they want to trade up this year and get a running back. If the Texans don't love Judkins, maybe Buffalo going up and getting Judkins, you move back a few spots, pick up maybe an extra third or whatever the hell else you get. Maybe that's what they want to do. But I'm not dismissing Judkins as someone who warrants being picked in round 1. And that's not where I was at the start of this process, but that's where I've gotten now. The more information you consume about Judkins, the more it just kind of makes sense that maybe the media scouts are a little bit off on this. The other clues here in the locker room when it comes to guys that could be going in the first round, and we're talking about the backs, the guys that are attending the draft, and PFT put this up as well. These are the guys that will be attending the NFL draft in Green Bay. We have Tyler Booker, who visited with the Texans. So Tyler Booker's on the list. That's one Texans visit. Jahad Campbell. If the Texans take a linebacker, I think that people will go a little nuts. Will Campbell, no surprise. Abdul Carter, no surprise. Jackson Dart. Could he be off the board before the Texans go? Take 3 quarterbacks off. Jackson Dart. Or is he this year's Will Levis? Keep an eye on him. Matthew Golden, Mason Graham, Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty, no surprise. Will Johnson, Tet McMillan, we've talked about him. Jalen Milroe. That's an interesting one. I would be hilariously entertained if someone takes Jalen Milroe in the first round. He might be just kind of hanging out there till day 2. Even day 2, I would still be a little bit amused by it. But Jalen Milroe. And then Josh Simmons, the tackle out of Ohio State, he's been getting a lot of attention. A lot of people mocking him to the Texans. Doesn't seem like too many people are thrilled about that. But Josh Simmons is there. And then you have Malachi Starks, Shamar Stewart, who was on my plane back from the combine. And then Cam Ward, no surprise, Michael Williams out of Georgia. So the Texans have visited with Golden, and they visited with Booker on this list as of the most recent list that I saw, which isn't the end all be all. It doesn't matter. Sometimes you visit with them in other places, whether it be the Senior Bowl or Combine or whatever, or maybe you have enough information. Maybe you don't want to tip your hand. Who knows? Someone said trade up for Golden. What do you want to give up for him? How good do you think he is? Because you probably got to trade up before 15. Dallas at 12 is a spot to look at there. How much you want to trade up for Golden? Seems a little desperate for me. And I like his game fine. But trade up for Golden, what do you want to trade? You want to trade your second and your third? One of your thirds? You want to deplete the superpower from Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans and take away their day 2 magic? I'm not really a fan of that. Not really a fan of that at all. I don't care if they have extra picks or not. I'm not going to be reckless with them. And they already traded a decent chunk of the Deshaun Watson extra picks that they had for Will Anderson. And quite frankly, you could use some more young talent on this team. So I don't look at this like blowing money at a casino. You look at what they did on day 2 last year. And we don't even know if they got a starting tackle. If Blake Fisher ends up being good, it's even more of an elite display. You want to take that away from him for Matthew Golden? I like Golden fine. I mean, no disrespect, but I mean, let's be serious. He could end up being fine in the NFL, but to me, like when I look at Matthew Golden, I've been pretty familiar with his game lately. I think he's fine, but I also think he's kind of a symbol of how weak this wide receiver draft is. So I don't care about the extra picks. I care about getting as many guys as possible. And I don't think that's like a worthy trade up. Quite frankly, if you're going to trade up that far, I almost think Loveland would be more appealing than Golden. For whatever reason, I have it in my mind, though, that Loveland doesn't get past the Colts after Tyler Warren gets drafted right in front of their faces. And he's kind of been the guy they want. But I would rather have Loveland if you're going to trade up than Golden. I like Golden fine. But Not even really that much at 25 and not that much a little bit sooner. We'll do a hypothetical. Lou the Foo, shout out to everyone in the chat. He says, theoretically, if Ibuka, Loveland, and Hampton and Banks were available at 25, good Lord. Who would you pick or trade back 4 spots? I mean, if you tell me I can trade back 4 spots, I would do it. Because I think you'd be fine with any of those guys. If those 4 guys got back there, given what's in front of you, then there would be some pissed off fan bases. There would be some absolutely pissed off fan bases. If you talk about Denver, Pittsburgh, Los Angeles, Green Bay, Minnesota, who I think is going to trade back. I think Minnesota trades back because they only have the 4 picks. But if those 4 guys get to you and then you're talking 4 spots, trading back 4 spots would be with Washington. So are you saying Washington takes like a Buffalo's 5 spots? I mean, yeah, if all those guys are there, I think you trade back. I would not count on that though. I don't even know why people are talking about Tyler Warren. Like Bentley talking about Tyler Warren. Yeah, he's a good player. He's not. He's a top 10 pick in this draft. He could go 3 to New England, quite frankly. That would not be the. I mean, he could go to Jacksonville. He's damn sure not going to the Raiders. He's not getting past Indianapolis. So, at the very least, you're going to have to trade up in front of Indianapolis. Like at the very least, at 13 with Miami. But I would be insanely shocked if he's there. So Warren means, I mean, he's a non-factor and he has no localized relevance at all. I wouldn't even look at Warren. I don't even know where the Colts are at this point, honestly, unless they're going to do something crazy and trade up. Maybe they trade with New England. Maybe Vrabel makes a move, but that's a lot. I think if he gets to like 7, if Warren somehow falls to 7, because you know the Raiders aren't taking him, then I think maybe we see the Colts trade up. But there's been a strong obsession. It's been a public obsession with Indianapolis to trade up or to get Tyler Warren. And it's just kind of a tough, kind of going to be a tough pill for them to swallow. But the Warren thing is, that's gone. And I think any positional value thoughts about tight end, they've kind of declined because of Brock Bowers. And I think they've also kind of declined because of the weakness at the wide receiver position. If you had the wide receivers that they had last year, where there were 7 taken in the first round and some pretty damn good ones taken on day 2, then the Texans are sitting pretty at 25. That's not the case this year. And that's why it's very dangerous. I was talking to someone and they said, you need to quit talking about multiple slot receivers because the Texans need an outside vertical threat that can complement Nico Collins. My response is, give me the fucking name. Like, give me the name of the guy who that is. Because, of course, you would love to have that. Brian Thomas isn't in this draft. There's no Xavier Worthy. Coleman's not in this draft. There's no Leggett. These are all guys that were taken in the background around when the Texans were taken. So give me that guy. Because if you can draft like that and you can just say, we need that, then that would be a hell of a fantasy land to live in. But when I say multiple slots, multiple tight ends, multiple backs, I always want multiple backs. But it's based on what the draft provides and what the opportunities are. Yeah, you can easily sit there and say, I could easily sit there and say, yeah, well, the Texans need to draft a guy on the outside that's a deep threat. Okay, who? At 25, who? In this draft? Who is that guy? There seems to be more value in guys who can do damage in the slot, especially with where you're drafting at 25. You can maybe kick the tires on some guys on day 2, but at 25, and with the guys that they're visiting with, Ibuka's going to be primarily in the slot. Burden was primarily in the slot. They visited with Noel. Noel's primarily in the slot. So who are these guys? Would be the question. That's just not really how it works. This isn't Amazon. Unfortunately, NFL drafts aren't like Amazon. You can find anything on Amazon. They're more like random ass department stores. They're like restaurants. You open up and see what's on the menu. You go in there saying, man, I would really go for this. They don't have it. Or they might have it and you've heard it sucks, which is kind of where the state of the wide receiver position, where the field kind of is at 25. You hope maybe there's an Ibuka on the menu. But it's not just Amazon. You type in fast wide receiver on the outside and all of a sudden that comes up. I think that's a great thing to imagine. I would love that. It doesn't work like that. Is that a fan that said that? Yes, it was a fan. I think it was a message, DM or something like that. Shout out to everyone on the DM or on the chat. But that would be fine. How do you feel about McMillan aside from the film drama? So John Harris is going to come on at 8 on Wednesday. I was having this conversation with him and he said, if he falls to 25, you make the pick. At 25, it's hard for me to nitpick Tet McMillan, especially given the draft. Here's the thing. There's a couple of things about McMillan that I think matter. And by the way, shout out to Cody Stutes for digging up that clip and it making the rounds. I did see the quote from McMillan saying that he needed to grow up. So he acknowledged that he was probably a little bit immature when that came out. So salute to him. We'll see how it goes. There are some things, like, I don't think the Texans are as set in stone in their ways as they were in the past, but there is kind of a line in the sand in what they want to do. And I think we've kind of seen some of the moves that they made this offseason that kind of exemplify that having the right kind of guy, having the swarm mindset, having the iron sharpens iron is pretty important to them. Like Jalen Petrie, we don't have to have this argument anymore about what type of player Jalen Petrie is or isn't. It doesn't matter. Like, we've already had the discussion. It is what it is. I do wonder about the durability, though, being that size and playing that close to the line of scrimmage. It almost feels running back-ish, like how they were talking about running backs a couple of years ago. And I also thought there was opportunity to get guys like that. But I digress. The point is that the Jalen Petrie move was about more than just how he plays. We can all agree on that. He's one of the most accountable guys. He's one of the best in the community. He's one of the guys that they want the younger guys to look to. You've heard what D'Amico has said about him. You've heard what Caserio said about him. You've heard what his teammates have said about him. So it's about more than just what Jalen Petrie has done or hasn't done. Regardless of how you feel about it, that's part of it. I think there's other moves they've made where it might not be Jalen Petrie, but maybe they made a decision in the opposite way when it comes to making the move and factoring those things in. So I know it was a few years ago, but when you hear Burden and you hear that maybe there's a lack of effort, consistent effort, you hear that he's not like the first guy in line at practice. I heard Clarence Hill say that on the DLLS podcast back and forth. He said he talked to someone from Missouri that said that. I don't know that that's something they overlook. Or, I just don't know. Like, and you look at the guys that they bring, and that's why Booker and Ibuka are two guys that I think have the Petrie traits, as well as the talent to warrant drafting at 25. And they're also two guys that they visited with. They're both former teammates with the two faces of where this thing started, Will Anderson and CJ Stroud. So as much as I like McMillan, and I know that it's not as set in stone, I do think that those things might be hard for them to overlook. Them being D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio. They want guys who love football. And that's just why I would have a hard time. And the other thing about the McMillan fall would be, what does everybody else know? And this week of an offensive draft or this week of a wide receiver draft, if he falls to you at 25, doesn't that kind of tell you something? Like, I would almost be more encouraged if they traded up for McMillan than I would if he fell to you at 25. I know that we've seen guys fall in the draft. Jefferson fell because everybody thought he was a slot guy, and that was all he could do. Randy Moss fell because of character stuff, but this guy would be falling, you would think, because of effort and because of maturity issues. So that's kind of where I'm at when it comes to McMillan and Burden. I don't know that it's a foregone conclusion that the Texans would just say, okay, we'll take Tet McMillan. Just not completely sold on that when it comes to McMillan. I am starting to become intrigued by the Judkins thing, though. Starting to be very intrigued by that. The Simmons thing, I mean, what does that say? What are your, if you draft a tackle in round 1, I would be very intrigued to see what your starting tackles look like. And I know you couldn't just assume that you were going to get a tackle that you liked. So that's why you had to make the Cam Robinson move. But you did draft Blake Fisher last year. You didn't draft him to be your swing tackle for 4 years. So maybe the opportunity presents itself to where you like a tackle, and I would be fine with that because you can't predict the future, and you don't know that you would like a tackle, and you probably need as many bodies as possible. But if you do draft a tackle, and let's say that Blake Fisher is not one of those starters, that's kind of tough. I know you don't hit all your picks. Even Philadelphia, they've missed some costly ones. We mentioned Jefferson. They took Jalen Reagor before Jefferson. We don't talk much about that because they hit about 75% of their draft picks, but we don't really talk about that. But if you do take a tackle in round 1, my God, is he going to start over Blake Fisher? Are him and Fisher going to be the starting tackles? That would be cool. Because then you'd have 2 young tackles, especially if they perform at a decent level. But what does that say if Blake Fisher's not one of those answers at tackle? Maybe it's just the opportunity presented itself, which would be fine. But in a perfect world, you want Blake Fisher to win one of those starting spots. Now, you say that tackle better start. Okay. Does Cam Robinson start? You gave him $15 million. So maybe Cam Robinson's an expensive swing tackle, and you have Simmons and Fisher. Maybe he beats out Fisher. I don't know. I'd be a little bit, I guess, intrigued. I guess you get the popcorn ready for that. I wonder what they say about Blake Fisher. How do they feel? I mean, there were some rough moments last year with Blake Fisher. There were some good ones too. But where do they sit if they take a tackle and Blake Fisher doesn't start? Kind of tough. So to reset, I think Judkins would be discussed a little bit different if he would have just stayed at Ole Miss. I think the media scouts might be fooling us in that area. I think Abuka and Booker are the right kind of guys. And I don't think McMillan is someone that they really want. I don't know. And the Golden people, I think in a perfect world, Golden should be available at 25 in a normal receiver draft. Unfortunately for the Golden lovers, the Golden guys and girls, this is not a normal wide receiver draft. So they're talking about him being top 15, which I think is wild. not ideal. We'll do a 3-round mock draft before we get the hell out of here. We're not going to do 4. We'll do a 3-round mock draft. So we'll do the first 2 days. And as we already have mentioned, we're going to be at Karbach Biergarten on day 3. So we're going to set up what we would be talking about there with this 3-round. We go to Pro Football Network. We got the Texans. We got 3. And we got the draft speed. So here we go. Start this draft. We got a little Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Carter action. Oop, the Jags take Tyler Warren. You got to think the Colts are going to take Loveland, right? Or are they going to throw a hissy fit? Oh, the Colts take Shedeur Sanders. That would set the internet off. A Shedeur Sanders, Daniel Jones. Shedeur Sanders, Daniel Jones. Anthony Richardson QB battle. How about that? All right, so Arizona's offering us 25, 166, 28 and a second. I would take this, but this isn't a futures draft, so we're just going to stay at 25. But let's let it be known that if that was offered to Nick Caserio and D'Amico, and they could trade back 3 spots and get another second next year, they should do it. I think that would give you 3 seconds next year. But we'll reject it just because we're staying at 25. Now, Buffalo's doing the same thing. When they want to trade back, man, people are just trying to give Texans second-round picks in 2026. All right, we'll do the – oh, God. All right, we're going to do the Giants trade, okay, because this will give us two picks in this mock draft. So this gives us a day 2 buffet, and we're going to go ahead and accept this from the Giants. And we're going to trade back, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope that one of these running backs is here, although that run could happen very quickly. It has not happened. We are rejecting this, and we are rejecting everything else, and we are staying put, and we are drafting at 34. And look what has happened. Omarion Hampton has fallen in the draft. So we will take Omarion Hampton. We get our running back at 34. And I think people are thrilled with this. The trade back pays off. And now we still have 4 picks on day 2, which is the superpower for Caserio and D'Amico. Now we get here. We need a receiver. We're rejecting all your trades, okay? So we need a wide receiver. Jackson Dart fallen. Milrow, he's in that draft room. He's looking side. Mason Taylor, very solid. Now the receivers, not so great. I am intrigued by Higgins, but we're going to go. They visited with Arroyo and Helm. And you got to think they like those guys, but we go with the man with the best genes in the draft, the son of Zach Thomas's sister and the son of Jason Taylor. We go with Mason Taylor, and we get a tight end. So we're trying to get CJ some help. We got him a running back. We got a tight end. I can already hear some of you in the chat saying, where's the offensive line? Let's see what we can do at offensive line or wide receiver. We got Higgins right there. So we got Higgins. There's some interesting options at offensive line. These guys are all the same to me, to be honest with you. So we're going to go ahead and take Higgins. And we got 2 more picks. We'll go O-line. We'll satisfy the O-line. We're not going defense for D'Amico, though. We ain't doing all that. So this is what we got so far. We got Hampton, Taylor, and Higgins without even picking in the first round. I think we can reject that. We'll draft. We'll go O-line. Jackson Dart sure is falling. What did he do? I think Jackson Dart did the Laramie Tunsil, and he must have ripped the bong and been on that
high-grade marijuana called Kush on the streets.
Or hell, who knows what he did? But kind of a problem there. All right, so we have offensive lineman Cameron Williams, not a big fan. A little bit too raw. Dylan Fairchild, offensive guard. We know they like Georgia guys, so we'll go with Fairchild, the guard. And we have one pick left, 89. Someone's going to offer us a trade. They always do on this one, the Pro Football Network, which creates some really wacky stuff. But we reject that. And we look, could go with a little Restrepo action. Heard the Julian Edelman comparison. Isaiah Bond ain't going to be a Texan. I said they're a little bit more open-minded. They ain't going that far. Man, you could have had Kevin Winston, but they like Jalen Petrie. That's a really good safety right there. Can do a lot of things. Turner, we know they visited with Turner. So we'll give D'Amico his D tackle. Turner, there's your D tackle. There's your mock draft, 2-round mock draft. You get your running back Hampton. He ain't falling to 34. That would be crazy. Other crazier things have happened, I guess. You got Taylor. You got your tight end of the future. And then you got Higgins as the wide receiver. Probably a slot guy. And then you got your guard. You got your tackle. I'd say it's a well-rounded 2-rounder. Not too bad. So there you go. Williams will probably be a little bit later. But yeah, there you go. That's the mock draft. Boom, boom. Don't know what Jackson Dart did. What did Jackson Dart do, chat? What did he do? What would you predict Jackson Dart did to fall in the draft to the 3rd round? What did he do? I would say like money laundering or like tax evasion. Jackson Dart kind of looks like a tax evasion type of guy. Like, what would he do to fall in the draft? I've heard he's a fine young man. But what did this guy do? What did this guy do to fall in the draft? The mock draft. I'm going to go with tax evasion. I'm going to say he was running like an illegal hedge fund with his NIL money at Ole Miss. What did he do? Someone says he cuts the crust off of his sandwiches. Never understood that, to be honest with you. I kind of think the crust adds a nice little element, but I could definitely see that. That fall would be crazy. I don't see the fall happening. I think Shedeur Sanders could fall, though. If he went to Indianapolis, man, that internet would go nuts. Anthony Richardson, Shedeur Sanders. Good Lord. Well, we're almost there. 9 days away from the draft. The media scouts, including myself and all you people, we are enjoying what's going on. The Judkins movement is upon us. Just to reset the top 5 media scout storylines with the Texans localized. 1st round wide receiver market up to 25. Are any of them going to be there? Any of the top 3? The fall off of Banks, is Kelvin Banks, is the fall real? Are any running backs going after Omarion Hampton and Genty in round 1? Hampton fell to us in the 2nd round in that mock draft. And then the guard positional value, would they really take a guard with Booker? And then is the Burden 2024 dud, is that a thing? Is he not even considered? Who the hell knows? Appreciate y'all for coming through. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like. Be sure to ride along. And be sure to bring your ass to the party. Karbach, the 26th, 11 a.m. Myself, Cody Stutz. We got a lot of surprises in store, but really, we just want to talk some ball, drink some pints, and eat some pizza. And it is a very good pizza spot, by the way. Very underrated. They've done a good job. You know, they wouldn't half-ass it there. Just like we don't half-ass it, and we are with you 24/7. The Harris stream at 8 o'clock. We got a TV appearance, too. On Easter, we will be, myself and Cody Stutz will be on local TV around here. So go figure that. Little S&L local TV, probably pushing that party. Be there, be square. Always remember, whether you are or not, we still love you, and we're all in this together. Hit it, Grifty.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey. Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize. Every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the pulse of the city too. Landlocked. Got the game in the headlock. Localize every time. Can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not too. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days. Opinions to give. We got takeaways. If it's up, then it's up. We number 1. You don't need to try your luck.